Every night your brain performs one of the most important functions for human survival. Most people never notice it until it stops working.
Section 1. Consider someone sitting in a quiet room at 3 in the morning. The house is silent. The body is exhausted. The eyes burn with the ache of prolonged wakefulness. Every sensation points towards sleep, yet hour after hour nothing happens. Most people would call this ordinary insomnia and assume that eventually sleep will arrive. Hidden beneath that assumption is a belief so old that few people ever question it. If a human being becomes tired enough, sleep is inevitable. That belief feels true because it has been true for nearly every night of your life. We assume wakefulness has an endpoint, and that exhaustion automatically forces the brain into sleep. But sleep is not an automatic consequence of being tired. It is a biological process generated by specific structures inside the brain. Those structures can deteriorate, fail, and even be destroyed while the need for sleep remains completely intact. The person sitting awake at 3 in the morning is not necessarily being kept awake by stress, anxiety, or a disrupted schedule. In rare circumstances, the machinery responsible for creating sleep itself may be disappearing. The process can begin months before anyone suspects something is wrong, long before sleepless nights become impossible to ignore. Section 2. Sleep appears passive from the outside. A person closes their eyes, consciousness disappears, and hours later they wake feeling restored. Because we remember almost none of what happens during sleep, it feels like an empty gap in experience. In reality, that gap is one of the most biologically active periods of human existence. While you are absent from awareness, the brain performs work that cannot be done during wakefulness. Distinct stages of sleep unfold in a precise sequence. Waves of synchronized activity sweep across the cortex. Sleep spindles fire hundreds of times throughout the night. REM cycles consolidate memory, regulate emotion, and integrate experiences gathered during the day. The brain is not resting in the way most people imagine. It is maintaining itself. Cerebrospinal fluid moves through brain tissue, helping clear metabolic waste. Hormonal systems execute carefully timed programs. Immune processes are reinforced. The architecture of tomorrow's attention, emotional stability, and mental clarity is being built while you are unconscious. Every morning, people receive the results of this invisible maintenance without realizing it occurred. The ability to focus, regulate emotions, remember information, and perceive the world clearly depends on biological work completed during sleep. When that work begins to fail, the consequences appear long before the cause becomes visible. Section 3. At the center of this process is a structure most people have never thought about: the thalamus. Buried deep within the brain, the thalamus acts as a central coordinator for information moving between the body and the cortex. Nearly every sensory experience passes through it before reaching conscious awareness. The thalamus does far more than relay information. During sleep, specialized neurons inside this structure generate rhythmic patterns of activity that synchronize large regions of the brain. Sleep spindles emerge from this coordination. Slow oscillations spread across the cortex. The architecture of sleep is actively constructed through thalamic control. Every night, the thalamus performs a task most people assume happens automatically. It switches the brain from wakefulness into sleep. You do not consciously perform this transition. The thalamus does it for you. It has done so every night of your life. The need for sleep may originate throughout the body, but the transition into sleep depends on neural systems operating beyond conscious control. This creates a disturbing possibility. The biological pressure for sleep can remain completely intact, while the neural machinery required to produce sleep begins to disappear. The tiredness remains. The switch does not. Section 4. The process that destroys this system does not behave like ordinary disease. Most forms of brain injury leave recognizable signs. Infection produces inflammation. Trauma causes visible damage. Stroke interrupts blood flow. These mechanisms create signals that the body and medical science can detect. The condition behind fatal insomnia follows a different path. A normal protein changes shape. That altered protein then forces neighboring proteins to adopt the same abnormal configuration. The process spreads from molecule to molecule, creating a chain reaction that gradually destroys neurons without triggering the usual alarms associated with disease. No dramatic immune response occurs. No obvious warning signal appears. The destruction unfolds silently. Neuron by neuron, the structures responsible for generating sleep begin to disappear. The person remains capable of feeling exhausted, capable of needing sleep, yet progressively less capable of producing it. By the time symptoms become obvious, the damage has often been underway for months. The machinery of sleep has already been eroding in private, hidden from awareness, hidden from sensation, and hidden from ordinary medical detection. Section 5. The earliest changes do not look neurological. They look like life. A person may become slightly more anxious, emotionally reactive, or mentally fatigued. Small disturbances appear in daily functioning, subtle enough to be blamed on stress, poor sleep habits, aging, or the demands of modern life. At the same time, autonomic systems begin to drift. Heart rate rises, sweating becomes more common, body temperature regulation becomes less stable. None of these symptoms immediately suggest a catastrophic neurological process. Each can be explained away as something ordinary. What is actually disappearing is deep restorative sleep. The individual cannot observe their own sleep architecture. They experience only the consequences. Mornings feel less refreshing. Focus weakens. Emotional resilience declines. Recovery becomes incomplete. The shell of sleep remains, but the biological work that sleep normally performs is slowly fading. The person wakes each morning slightly diminished without knowing why. The gap is small at first, barely noticeable. Yet every day the sleeping brain delivers a little less maintenance than it did before. The deterioration is gradual enough to feel normal until it becomes impossible to ignore. Section 6. Sleep does not vanish all at once. It dismantles itself stage by stage. The deepest forms of sleep disappear first because they depend most heavily on the neurons being lost. Sleep spindles become less frequent. Slow oscillations become weaker. Critical maintenance processes stop running at full capacity. Each lost spindle represents work that will never be completed. Memory consolidation weakens. Metabolic waste accumulates. Hormonal regulation drifts. The person cannot feel these individual failures as they occur. They experience only the growing weight of their combined consequences. From the outside, the individual still appears to sleep. Their eyes close. Their body remains still. Yet the electrical architecture inside the brain no longer resembles healthy sleep. The body performs the motions of sleep, while the biological function of sleep continues to disappear. Eventually, even REM regulation begins to fail. Boundaries between sleeping and waking states blur. The brain reaches for transitions it can no longer complete. Wakefulness cannot fully become sleep, and fragments of sleep cannot sustain themselves. The mechanism that once coordinated both states is breaking down. This is the deepest violation hidden beneath the disease. Exhaustion continues to build. The need for sleep remains overwhelming. But the system capable of transforming that need into actual sleep is gone. What remains is not ordinary sleep deprivation. It is the progressive destruction of the biological machinery that made sleep possible in the first place. The person awake at 3 in the morning is not merely experiencing a disruption. They are confronting an absence. The system that was supposed to end their wakefulness is no longer there. And in the next chapter of this story, the question is no longer how sleep disappears. The question becomes what sleep was protecting all along.
If you're fascinated by documentaries like this, subscribe to Pathology of Fear. New medical documentaries every week.
Section 7. Sleep was never simply a period of rest. Every night it recalibrated the body. Hormones followed precise schedules. Body temperature dropped and recovered. Cardiovascular rhythms reset. Immune systems coordinated their activity. and countless biological processes quietly return to balance. Most people never notice this work because it never stops. They wake up feeling stable and assume that stability belongs to them, when in reality, it was produced overnight by sleep. As the thalamus begins to lose its integrity, the systems that depend on sleep begin drifting out of synchronization together. Cortisol remains elevated. The body behaves as though it is trapped in a permanent stress response. Heart rate stays high, blood pressure refuses to normalize, and body temperature loses its nightly rhythm. The body is still alive, but it is no longer receiving the biological conditions it was designed to experience every night. Weight loss, metabolic instability, and progressive exhaustion begin appearing even when food intake remains unchanged. Something is clearly wrong, yet the cause remains hidden deep inside a sleep-generating structure most people have never heard of. What is being lost is not rest. What is being lost is regulation itself. Section 8. The brain maintains a boundary between two worlds. One is the waking state, connected to external reality through the senses. The other is the sleeping state, filled with internally generated dreams, emotions, and neural activity. Every day and every night, the thalamus silently controls movement between these worlds, making the transition feel effortless and invisible. As thalamic neurons die, that boundary begins to fail. Dream content starts leaking into wakefulness. Figures appear where no figures exist. Sounds emerge without sources. Familiar environments briefly transform into something else. These are not ordinary hallucinations. They are fragments of the sleeping brain activating inside the waking brain because the gate separating the two states is no longer functioning correctly. What makes this especially disturbing is that awareness often remains intact. The person may understand that what they are seeing is not real, yet they cannot stop experiencing it. The collapse of the boundary becomes visible only when it can no longer be maintained, revealing how much ordinary consciousness depends on a structure most people never knew existed. Section 9. Memory feels permanent because the process that creates it happens outside awareness. Each night, while a person sleeps, the brain transfers experiences from temporary storage into long-term memory. Skills strengthen, details become stable, and emotional experiences are integrated into a coherent record of the past. Sleep performs this work without participation from the person who benefits from it. When the architecture of sleep begins to collapse, memory loses its maintenance system. Recent conversations become difficult to retain. Events from earlier in the day begin dissolving before they can be fully stored. The person remembers experiencing something but struggles to keep hold of the record. It feels different from ordinary forgetting because the memory existed briefly before slipping away. At the same time, attention fragments and executive function deteriorates, concentration collapses, planning becomes difficult, and complex thought grows increasingly unstable. The loss is not psychological, it is structural. Sleep can no longer perform the work required to preserve the past, and the record of a person's life begins developing gaps. Section 10. Most people assume the self is stable. They believe the person who wakes up in the morning is automatically the same person who went to sleep the night before. Fatal insomnia challenges that assumption by revealing how much of identity depends on maintenance that occurs during sleep. Emotional regulation, memory consolidation, perceptual stability, attention, and coherent thought all rely on processes that are refreshed every night. As sleep disappears, these systems begin failing together. Emotional responses become disproportionate, perception becomes unreliable, memories become incomplete, and the continuity that normally connects one day to the next begins to weaken. The self is not a fixed object, preserved automatically through time. It is an ongoing biological process that requires constant repair. Every night, sleep quietly rebuilds the emotional balance, memories, and mental stability that allow a person to remain recognizably themselves. The tragedy of fatal insomnia is not only the loss of sleep, it is the gradual loss of the mechanisms that preserve identity itself. Section 11. By this stage, the damage is no longer isolated to individual systems. The failures begin interacting with one another. Metabolic stress worsens cognitive decline. Cognitive decline reduces the ability to compensate for physical deterioration. Hormonal disruption amplifies every other problem. What began as separate losses becomes a single converging collapse. Months without meaningful deep sleep leave the body metabolically exhausted, hormonally dysregulated, immunologically compromised, and unable to maintain normal biological rhythms. Communication becomes difficult, not because awareness has completely disappeared, but because the systems required to organize thought and translate it into language are progressively failing. The body's internal clock may continue signaling that it is time to sleep and time to wake, but the structure responsible for carrying out those transitions is gone. The brain still knows what should happen. It simply no longer possesses the machinery required to make it happen. The signals continue, the response never arrives. Section 12. The disease itself is extraordinarily rare, but the lesson it reveals is universal. Fatal insomnia demonstrates that sleep is not passive. It is an active biological process that supports memory, emotional stability, perception, hormonal regulation, autonomic balance, and the continuity of consciousness itself. Most people experience sleep as an absence. They disappear into darkness and later return to wakefulness with no awareness of what occurred in between. Fatal insomnia exposes the truth hidden inside that gap. The sleeping brain is not inactive. It is performing some of the most important work in human biology, maintaining the systems that make waking life possible. Every night, the thalamus coordinates vast patterns of neural activity. Memories are consolidated, metabolic waste is cleared, hormonal systems recalibrate, emotional experiences are processed. The person who wakes tomorrow is being assembled while the person of today is absent. This work is invisible only because it is normally reliable. The person awake at 3 in the morning, exhausted and unable to cross into sleep, is experiencing the absence of that maintenance directly. What is being lost is not merely sleep. It is emotional regulation, memory, perception, identity, and the biological continuity that connects one day of life to the next. Sleep was never passive. It was the foundation beneath everything else.
Pathology of Fear is a medical documentary series presenting clinically documented neurologic and pathological mechanisms for educational analysis.